In our world, the defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945 was the foundation of modern democracy and global cooperation. But what if one small hinge of history had swung the other way? What if Hitler had won World War II? A more aggressive and successful Luftwaffe in the Battle of Britain, combined with a successful capture of Gibraltar, forces the British government to accept a humiliating armistice in late 1941, securing Germany's western flank. Churchill has no choice but to go into exile in Canada. With Britain out, the isolationist tide in America holds firm. Japan's December 7th attack on Pearl Harbor still happens, but the US focus is now purely on the Pacific. Europe is left to the Fuhrer. With no threat of a two-front war from Britain, Germany commits everything east. The Red Army, already reeling, is broken by a focused drive. Moscow and Leningrad fall by 1942. Hitler's dream of the Greater Germanic Reich is realized. Territories like Poland, the Baltic states, and Belarus are carved up into brutal Reichskommissariats, labor camps on a continental scale.
The world settles into a cold peace between two fascist superpowers, Germany and Imperial Japan. The two powers share a border on the Urals and Siberia, but deep ideological, racial, and territorial tension exists. Just like the US and the Soviets in our timeline, they are locked in a silent arms race. German scientists, under programs like the Uran Project, are heavily funded and achieve a nuclear deterrent by the early 1950s. Japan follows shortly after, plunging the world into an even more precarious state than our Cold War. The United States is an isolated, militarized, and deeply distrustful superpower. They defeated Japan in the Pacific in a grueling war but are now alone, facing two hostile, nuclear-armed continental empires. The focus is on a massive, permanent military buildup. For an Aryan German citizen, life in the early Reich is one of manufactured utopianism. New autobahns, state-subsidized cars, and vast public works projects fuel a sense of national pride. But this prosperity is built on the backs of millions of conquered peoples. In occupied nations like France, Britain, and Eastern Europe, the SS and Gestapo rule through absolute terror. Resistance movements are constant, but face overwhelming suppression.
By the 1960s, the Führer is a recluse, an aging demagogue obsessed with architecture and his own historical legacy. His bureaucratic state, however, is a chaotic mess, a patchwork of competing power baronies under the SS, the Wehrmacht, and the Party. The Lebensraum project is a disaster. Colonization in the East is slow, expensive, and constantly threatened by a brutal, endless partisan war. The vast expenditures on a nuclear space program and the Germania project are bankrupting the Reich. Adolf Hitler, on the eve of his 77th birthday, dies of a stroke. The power vacuum is immediate and explosive. The death of the charismatic leader shatters the foundation of the state. The power struggle is not an election, but a slow-motion coup. Reinhard Heydrich, the master of the SS, emerges as the new, cold-blooded and ruthlessly pragmatic leader, eliminating rivals like a weakened Himmler. Heydrich, unlike Hitler, is not a fanatic for its own sake, but a pragmatist obsessed with long-term survival. He attempts a de-Hitlerization, reducing some of the most visible architectural folly and trying to stabilize the economy to fight the Cold War with the US. He also attempts to open secret, limited diplomatic channels with the Americans to ease the military burden in the East.
In this world, technology is hyper-focused on military and state control. Jet technology is advanced, rocketry is pushed to the limit, and the Reich is an early contender in the space race. But basic consumer goods are scarce, and scientific research in many fields is crippled by racial dogma. All media is state-controlled propaganda. Jazz and American pop culture are banned. Neoclassical German music and propaganda films are the only acceptable forms of entertainment. The United States, now the lone beacon of democracy, is deeply changed. The civil rights movement is heavily suppressed by a government obsessed with internal security. The paranoia of the external threat justifies a permanent surveillance state. By 1970, the seemingly monolithic Axis power is showing its cracks. In the East, the partisan war is a bleeding wound the Reich cannot close. In the West, occupation breeds deep, generational resentment. And across the Pacific, the nuclear rivalry with Japan is reaching a fever pitch. This world is not one of triumphant utopianism, but of a dark, unstable, and terrifyingly fragile tyranny.
The victory of the Third Reich was built on the destruction of freedom and the industrialization of mass murder. Even with all the power of a continent, the regime carried deep contradictions. Its endless wars, chaotic leadership, and its foundation of brutal inhumanity made its fall inevitable. A world won by Hitler was never destined for 1,000 years of glory. It was destined for a short, agonizing, and spectacular collapse.